Okay.
Welcome to another edition of the Bottom Line. We have got a good one for you tonight. Jeff Barnes, Director of NFL Scouting for Team NBS, is with us. I cannot wait to pick his brain about everything football. So, Ed?
Sounds like we've got a lot to talk about. Let's get this show kicked off.
And that's the bottom line. You want a war? You're going to get one.
The cream will rise to the top, oh yeah.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Hard work pays off. Dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Bottom Line. Without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Jeff Barnes, Director of NFL Scouting. He doesn't want to listen to that freaking hornet. Oh, yeah. It's like a gazoo. Even Jeff's laugh. He's like, what is that crap? Come on, man.
It's getting him in the mood, getting him psyched up here. Here's the Viking sword. It's ready. He's ready to go.
With my esteemed co-host, Big Daddy Ed, the 23rd selection on our interview list, Big Chad. Welcome in, Jeff. Jeff, it's an honor to have you on the Bottom Line. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys. You know, it's that busy time of year for me with my hands being a lot of pots, so I'm glad I can come out here and talk some football with you guys.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to it because this is the all football all the time show. We live, eat, sleep, breathe it, as I know in your capacity you probably do as well in your job. So, you know, I just want to kick things off right away and just have you kind of describe, you know, what it is you do and, you know, what your job is with the NFL.
Gotcha. So I'm with Team NBS Media. I am their Director of NFL Scouting. I started out with my own scouting brand. I was an independent scout, still technically am, just on the media side. So I do everything an NFL scout would do. I go on the road and observe prospects. I go out there, I grade them. I have their scouting reports readily available. The difference between me and an NFL scout is they're beholden to a GM. They can't share. I can share with anybody. So that's the beauty of my job is I don't have to listen to a GM and be very secretive. I can tell anybody everything that I go out there and find.
So you don't have, so in your capacity, you're not, Tampa Bay, Chicago, Minnesota. You are a general scouting and any team. So do teams contact you themselves or do you kind of reach out to the teams? How does that work?
So what we do is much similar to what you see with the guys like, the Mike Mayox and those guys that run networks. We go out there, we observe, we scout, we evaluate. We try and talk to those scouts to find out what those teams' needs are, what they're thinking. So we can accurately put together a draft board based on teams' needs, what they believe about these players. Because as much as we think about them, it's all about what the teams are going to do. We're trying to figure out what these teams believe about these players. And that's the main thing we do. When we're talking to scouts, and we have to do it secretively because the GMs don't like them sharing with us. But what we do is we talk to them to try and get a feel for what that team feels about players, how they're looking at this draft, what they're looking at needs-wise, whether they're going to go heavy in free agency to fill needs and then come back and clean up in the draft, or they want to get really, really young and load up on a lot of draft picks and bring in some moderate level free agents to come build their team. So we do a lot of trying to information gathering like scouts do, but we're gathering from teams as well as the players.
So in your capacity, how difficult is it for you to know, this is kind of how Tampa Bay operates. This is kind of how Baltimore operates. Does that play a large role into kind of how you have to operate from different angles?
It's a harder thing for us to do because we don't have the power of the shield behind us, right? So I can't go to the university's pro personnel director and say, hey, I'm with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're immediately going to flood me with information. I have to build that level of trust with universities to say, okay, this guy's for real. We have to go out there and honor him when he's here scouting. So basically, since 2017, I've been going around small school, big school, getting to know kids on campus, getting to know their organizations, the people there, trying to be able to evaluate kids, not only just on the field when you're looking at the tape or looking at them live, but also trying to find out character concerns. We talk about things that are going on. Well, the NFL has investigators. I don't. So while they have 20 guys that can do all that stuff, I'm one guy doing what 20 guys do.
So in your capacity then, so getting down to the nuts and bolts of it, I've talked to a lot of college coaches. I was a high school coach. As you are currently in Florida, how's the team? First of all, how's the team going to be, Coach?
Oh, so far, we've played out one kind of preseason game, had a little bit of a rough outing, but we're a very young team. We lost about 25 seniors last year. A lot of them were guys with starting offensive production and defense. So a lot younger this year around, but I think the guys are going to get better as the season goes along. If we have a strong start, it'll be a lot easier to clean things up later in the season. So we open the season against a very tough opponent, Wiregrass Ranch, which is actually right here in Wesley Chapel where I am. So we're considered the new kid on the block. We're only 8, 9 compared to them. But nevertheless, we've been in the playoffs now 3 times in the past 5 years. So now we're trying to get there and win, not just get there.
Right. And I have to believe in our capacity here, just knowing the number of kids that come out of Florida compared to, let's say, the number of kids that come out of Iowa, it's substantially different. So I have to believe the program that you're involved in probably slightly different than the program that I was involved in.
Or the one I played in New York when I was there. We didn't get a lot of D1, D2 guys. I had to try and walk on at an HBCU, at an FCS program, so we're getting guys that are starting to get looks now. Actually, I'm excited to see Air Force this year. Our starting kicker from 3 years ago is going to be their starting kicker this season, a kid who had a 60-yard leg in high school. So we're starting to get the young talent coming through the school that's getting the eyes of college coaches. The D3 coaches love us because they're like, oh, well, nobody's interested in these guys. We'll take them. But we're trying to get the bigger schools, the guys that we believe that can play the D2, the FCS level ball, even the FBS level ball. We're trying to get those guys there. But it's a lot harder now with the transfer portal. The portal takes away a lot of things before they even get to the high school kids. Yeah,
and we will address the portal a little bit later, but kind of along those lines, using your high school experience, are you seeing more guys? Is there more interest from you as far as the scouting aspect at some of your FCS schools and even lower for the NFL, or are you mainly focused on Division I FBS? Here we go.
No, we go all the way down. We pride ourselves on being there on day 3 and letting people know we're in around 5, 6, and 7, when a lot of people are going, who's that guy? We're telling you who that guy is. We've been frustrated the past 3 years seeing no FCS, no HBCU prospects drafted, but then signed literally minutes after the draft. So we're going, if he was that good to sign that right away, you should have drafted him in round 7 instead of that guy who's a pile sprinkle at Iowa. So go out there. I believe if you have a guy who's at the FCS level, who's an outstanding player, all conference, all FCS, and you have a guy who's a guy at the FBS level, call the guy who's all FCS in round 7 and let the guy who's just a guy at the FBS level go out there and compete for his job after the draft. That's my opinion, but I'm not a GM. So
right. So
especially if they go to Iowa.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it. Iowa. I mean, I think Colin Cowherd calls them the fake ID of college football. Yeah. So I mean, we don't even want to get into that. I mean, as you can see, the Iowa State behind me. Yeah, right. Iowa State.
That's right.
So I got one more question. For me, it's a biggie. So I mentioned I've talked to college coaches and had discussions with them on, when you're looking at a high school prospect to come play at your program, what are some of the things you're looking for? And one of the things almost universally that they say is, the kid has to pass the eye test. And, back 20 years ago, we had a kid in our program that very good athlete, Division I school, shows up to the high school. And afterwards, he's like, when he walked through the door, he didn't wow me. He didn't pass the eye test. There was, I was almost kind of out on him from the time he walked through the door. And I appreciated that. But you're at a level where I feel like aside from high school to college, you're splitting the hairs even thinner. Can you kind of describe that process? Like when you're looking at scouts, what does that take us through that process? Like, what does that look like when you're taking, Big Chad and you're saying, okay, Big Chad can play in the NFL. What are some of the things that, that you're splitting to keep him in the NFL and say, oh, this guy is an NFL guy?
Well, one of the things we always hear a scout say is we observe traits, right? We look for athleticism. We look for football IQ, character. We look for a lot of things trait-wise in a player. There are guys that you're going to see at the college level. You're going to go, oh, wow, he's an Adonis. He's this. But he's not a very good football player, right? The guy that you want to walk off the bus first, but you don't want to see him out there on the 50-yard line. So that exists at the college level, not so much at the high school level. But what you're seeing is with NFL scouts, it's all about traits. We're looking at traits, developmental traits that we believe can translate this player to the next level. One of the things I always explain to kids when I coaching or when I'm talking to certain guys that are trying to get drafted that come to me going, how can I get seen? Well, I remind them that you're going from different levels. When you're going from high school to college, you're going from playing the best in your area to the best in the country. When you're going from college to the pros, you're going from playing the best in the country to the best in the world. So it's a big jump. If you're a guy who's playing middle of the road football at a Division II, you're going to have a hard time getting observed because if you're not blowing it up at Division II, they don't believe that you're going to go up there to the NFL and blow it up against those guys. So this one of those things you're looking for traits. Does he have enough speed to go out there and compete at the next level? Does he have the durability? One of the things already goes, why do y'all have the guys when you're measuring them come in their underwear? You want to see body type, right? You want to see if this guy can add on weight effectively, or if he doesn't have the ability to do so. You want to see deformities. Does he have that knock knee run? Okay, well, that's going to be something that's going to catch up with him. He may not be fluid enough to do certain things, change of direction. All of these things are traits that we look at when we're evaluating a prospect. And it takes all of that data we put together, and then we come up with a grade, right? So the NFL grading scale it's kind of shrunk, right? It goes up to, I believe, 8. But it goes lower, but most guys grade out somewhere between a 5 and an 8. Anybody that's in a 4s is virtually a reject, right? My grading scale is a lot broader. So, because the reason why I don't use the NFL grading scale, because I believe too many guys that are marginal talents get mixed in with guys that are developmental talents. So I have a different grading scale. It's a little bit broader, and it goes up to about 9. So in that one, I have different grades where I can go to my draft board, and I'll kind of show you. I still have my draft board up right there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I can go up there during the 3 days of the draft, and I can go through my draft board and say who's the best fit for this team when they're on the board, and be able to go through it and explain why. Because when I grade them based on whether they're going to be an all-pro, whether they're going to be a top quality starter, whether they're going to be a quality starter, good backup, quality backup, or average backup, special teams player. And then you get the developmental grades, and you get to the guys who, they're just marginal prospects who may have a chance of competing for practice squad or just their rejects.
Okay. We got a question out of the comment box here, Jeff. Would love to hear how much he is involved in scouting UFL talent to get into or back into the NFL. Do you have a lot of involvement with that?
No, because we do look at the UFL. However, just like the NFL, they're very self-contained. So they have their own scouting departments now. They used to use outside scouting agencies. They don't use them anymore. So they have their own groups now. They're very self-contained now. So, and unless you're at their showcases, you really don't get to see those guys until they're looking at college guys. So I may talk to some of their GMs and scouts. Very few of the scouts that I see on the road. It's mostly the GMs. So I may see those guys on the road and talk to them about a couple of guys, but that's usually about the limit of my involvement. They're very self-contained. So usually rely on what they've observed from outside showcases and what they've already had on film on certain guys is what they go through. So they do their 2 drafts and they do their showcases, and that's how they kind of flesh out their training camp rosters.
So one of the questions, and we've had this in the comment box before, and we've talked about it amongst ourselves. One of the players, there's a couple of them, but one of the players that just seems to be an enigma to us as to why he doesn't stick in the NFL, why he continually comes back to the UFL is a receiver for the St. Louis Battlehawks who signed with the Cincinnati Bengals, is Hakeem Butler.
Yes.
I mean, I've stood next to the guy, met the guy. He went to my alma mater, Iowa State. Like, he was just a beast, but he just has not been able to stick. What can it be? I mean, or maybe you have information, maybe you actually scout him, whatever. Like, why does a guy like that not stick in the NFL?
For Hakeem Butler, it's a little bit different for him because he's kind of that tweener, right? We talk about the Kelvin Benjamins.
Mm-hmm.
Kelvin Benjamin kind of came around at the right time because had he come around now, he'd probably been a guy they probably would have threw at tight end early in his career rather than towards at the end of it. When you're a bigger guy like that, if you don't have that special separation speed, which he never really had,
right?
That's one of the reasons why he kind of doesn't really stick a lot at the NFL level, but at the XFL, UFL level, he tends to do a lot better, right? The DBs aren't as quick to adjust and not as fast, so they're not as physical. So he's able to be the better athlete versus those guys. But at the NFL level, it's not the same kind of production. So that's one of the reasons why he's had that issue. That's one of the reasons why he's not the only one. You look at the N'Keal Harry's the same kind of receiver, that big receiver who doesn't have that special extra gear to separate. Separation is huge at the NFL level. And if you can't separate, you better be somebody like Des Bryant, who's able to just out-athlete you, or Randy Moss, who could jump over 2 and 3 people, right? That kind of that rare athleticism is an extra trait that some guys don't have, and that's kind of boosts you. He's athletic, but he doesn't have that kind of freakish athleticism that he could do that at the NFL level, and that's kind of what's kind of caught him in the end.
See, that's the thing, and that's why, just listen to you talk. It's like, wow, because, the average football guy looks at Hakeem Butler, stands next to him and says, man, how is this dude not in the NFL? But you see that little difference. I see him in the UFL, guys can't guard, but he's doing this, he's doing that. But you see in the NFL where it's that half a step or that step that he has in the UFL that doesn't translate to the NFL. And I would say, you're probably right. That may be a lot of the reason why the UFL guys are where they're at, is maybe they're lacking some of those pieces, obviously, to get them where they want to be. I mean, that's interesting stuff. So what we're going to do now, Jeff, is we've got some categories here, and we are going to pick your brain. So I hope you're ready for this. You've agreed to sit with us in the show. So, man, we have been we are excited about this. Even Brett can't contain himself. So when we get to Brett's segment, we'll have to utilize the mute button to get him to slow down a little bit so you can actually talk. He kind of gets on a roll sometimes, but we're gonna move to Ed a little bit, and we're gonna talk about the roster comparisons and kind of pick your brain a little bit to see where you kind of think teams fit a little bit. So, Big Daddy, you're the man.
Let's see how I can flip him around a little bit so that he can maybe move up the chain a little bit on how he sees the screen.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe he'll be able to see. You can block me out. That's not an issue. I'll just mute myself and listen.
So anyway, you might have to reach out there and look around to see the front of this, Jeff. So this come out, and kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about it. So, maybe some of the teams that you agree with, but ultimately I see a lot of these on here and I disagree. And maybe you can help me figure out why they graded to this level. Okay? So let's start at the bottom. So Buffalo is probably not hard to understand because they were so far over the cap at the end of last year that they had to do a major roster dump just to get their salary cap down. So we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on them. That's understandable. Denver, again, you can look at Denver and say, okay, Russell Wilson cost them $35 million dead money for this year, $50 million next year. So yeah, their roster is going to be worse because they don't have the money to replace. What do you think? And I agree with where Dallas is at there. Do you have any insight or do you have any idea what you think maybe the deal is with Jerry Jones? That he just kind of decided, this year I'm taking a back seat and just let things go?
No. What's happening in Dallas is this. There's two kind of things at play. There's a financial issue. You've got three major players that pay in 2 years. Okay, so this year it's Dak and CD. Next year is Micah Parsons. All three of those are going to be explosive contracts. You just paid Trayvon Diggs and a few other players. So, and Zach Martin. Zach Martin's also up after this year as well. So there is a lot of money that they have to find in this year and next year for those players. We know about the quarterback. He signed that short-year deal, that 4-year deal, to get to this point where he can get a bigger deal in 4 years. We're at that point. CeeDee Lamb, he's in the final year of his rookie deal. They gave him the rookie option. He's got 17 for this year. They would love to extend him and cut that 17 down and create more space. The problem is working those contracts. It takes them a long time to do one. So you got two at the same time. Good luck. All right. So that's one of the biggest problems they're having. But there's also the other side of it, right? You think about that loss to Green Bay. You think about the frustration, not only in the building, but outside the building. Yes, fans were saying get rid of everybody. But when you have the people close to him, the Michael Irvins, the Emmitt Smiths, and all of them saying these dudes got to go. All right? There's got to be real change. He kind of took that to heart. So how do you do that without killing your cap? Well, the easiest way to do that is let them play out the final years of their deal. If they come back and if they show you reason to bring them back, then you get them all paid and you move forward and you try and get the other guy signed next year. But if they don't, it's a clean slate after this year. They can go any direction they want to go in. So he's kind of giving people what they want and saying, dude's got to go. Okay, well, they got one more shot. He said, it was going to get uncomfortable around here when the season ended. It's gotten very uncomfortable, even for the fans who now all of a sudden are saying 6 months later, pay these people, right? They were just saying get rid of them 6 months ago. So there's a lot of frustration with Dallas. He's getting the brunt of it. He likes it because he likes to be the center of attention, but it's a kind of shrewd business move. Okay, well, I'm going to give you what you want, but at the end of the day, I still got to find a way to pay these guys if I do keep them. And it's got to be equitable. I can't just pay them all the money, and then I lose Micah Parsons a year after he finishes his contract, or I tag him and cut 3 other guys because they're going to people. If they keep Micah Parsons, somebody's got to go. And it's just the nature of the beast. The salary cap, you pay people, at least one person you pay, 2 other people got to go. So they're trying to get younger. They're trying to get better about getting younger and paying certain guys and letting certain guys walk. They let Tony Pollard walk. Well, they're going to go with a committee backfield, an older Zeke, a bunch of younger backs that they believe they can squeeze the juice out of. So that's the exception. You're going to pay the receivers? Well, we're going to go short money in the backfield. You're going to pay some of these offensive linemen? We're going to go a lot younger on the other offensive linemen. We got to pay my tight end. They didn't pay Dalton Schultz. They went with the younger tight ends. Jake Ferguson's killing it. Well, Jake Ferguson's going to come up on a contract pretty soon. Guess what? Is it going to be Schoonmaker when Jake Ferguson moves on? So there's a lot of moving pieces with the salary cap there. If you're going to keep guys, somebody's got to go. So when you look at the situation, I don't think that they're worse. If anything, they're in the even marginally worse, because when you look at the losses they suffered, they didn't lose anybody that they didn't replace either with younger talent or in-house talent. So Tony Pollard was a loss because they lost a big threat in the backfield, big play in the backfield. True. However, they have other guys that can produce some of that stuff, whether it was the special team stuff that he did or pass catching out of the backfield. So I think they'll be fine. They may have gotten better in the red zone without Tony Pollard, because we know about his struggles in short yardage and red zone with Zeke coming back. But if those other guys, those other young running backs stay healthy, they may get the same kind of production from the running game they got last year. The offensive line, they lost Tyron Smith. Well, Tyron Smith hasn't played a full season in 5 years. So they were playing a lot of patchwork lines the past couple of years without him. So they kind of upgraded there with the young tackle they got in the first round. So they're doing things to get younger, to replace older veterans, guys that they just couldn't afford anymore. So I think that's what another factor is there. I don't think Tampa Bay is worse either. And I'm not saying that because I'm in the area and I cover them. I think they did enough to keep the guys that they needed to keep. They brought back a guy that they lost a couple of years ago who's a major impact in their secondary. The offensive line has gotten better with the draft that they have had. So I think overall Tampa Bay is probably about even. They'll probably be as good as they were, if not a little bit better than they were last year. Buffalo, yes, you're right. They're definitely going to be worse because they lost a lot of pieces that they couldn't replace. They
lost both their safeties. They lost their starting cornerback.
Yeah, they lost both their receivers.
They lost Gabe Davis. I mean,
and they got some good receivers in the draft, but it's not the guys you lost. So you're hoping that the younger receivers you had are going to step up, but they're just like Dallas. You had to let some veteran talent go. You believe in the younger guys you got. You got to make sure that they come through for you. I don't think Denver's worse. I think they're pretty much the same as they were last year. They didn't have very good quarterback play last year. There's a lot of questions about the quarterback play this year. So they're in a similar situation. So,
but they're going to get strapped by a lot of dead money with the Russell Wilson.
Yeah, but they got younger at the quarterback position, so that kind of makes up for it. You're not paying a lot of money there. So that
you're not willing. You can't improve though either.
Yeah.
You're really hamstrung to really do anything about that. Another one that I thought was curious was saying that the Jets were marginally better. Their offensive line, if I remember right, graded out at a C+. They have 3 free agent offensive linemen coming in, which means they haven't played together. They haven't gelled.
And one hasn't played a full season in 5 years.
Right, and one of their starters played 5 games last year.
Yeah.
So with a 41-year-old quarterback that's not very mobile anymore, and who knows now that he tore his Achilles, how he comes back from that. I have a hard time understanding how they think that they got marginally better in the offseason.
I think having Aaron Rodgers makes them better because you're going to have better quarterback play than they had last year. I don't know if the offseason made them marginally better. I think they got some good talent in this draft. They got things that they desperately needed. They got a young tackle that's going to get a lot of playing time with one of those veteran tackles is hurt. So I think what you're going to see with the Jets is how fast their young talent comes around and produces. The defensive line talent, I have no doubts about. It's the offensive line talent that you got to really look at. Is that young talent going to come in and produce to the level they need to produce? Can they keep Aaron Rodgers healthy? Can they consistently run the football? That's what's going to make that team better. I don't think the moves that they made them a lot better. I think it's the matter of the young talent that they have playing better. You were able to move on from some young players because you didn't have to pay them because you had other guys that you drafted in-house. So that's been the big thing for them. They didn't have to they didn't have to re-sign Carl Lawson, so they were able to let him walk. So they've done so many things with the draft this year and last year to improve that team. I think that's what's going to make them better, not so much just this one offseason.
So we, of course, this is the team that everybody wants to talk about, and I have to talk about them. You look at Minnesota. They put them in the marginally worse category. Let's look at who they signed. They signed Van Ginkel out of Miami, the linebacker. Mm-hmm. They got Blake Cashman from Houston. They got Greenard from Houston. They got Stephon Gilmore, defensive back. They signed Eric Jones as running back. They got Tristan Jackson, who's really been a preseason gem, at least in the preseason games anyway. And then you turn around, and, their offensive line, they had 4 returning starters, all under contract. So who did they lose? They lost Danielle Hunter. But Danielle Hunter was an older version of what they're going to get out of Greenard, Houston, and Kirk Cousins. So I know that there's quite a gap between the performance of Kirk Cousins and Sam frickin' Darnold. But is that enough to trump all these other moves that Minnesota did to get better on defense?
I think they'll be better defensively. I don't think the quarterback play is going to be enough to elevate them better than they were last year. I think, unfortunately, Sam Darnold is Sam Darnold. One of the hard parts about it is because I remember Sam Darnold's last year at USC. He started the year as the QB1 for many people talking around college football. This is the guy that's going to be the first quarterback taken in the draft. And then he turns the ball over 21 times his last year at USC. And quite a few of them were egregious turnovers. So it was, okay, he's not a QB1. But yet we went into the draft process, and he sits out the combine because he just wanted to keep it all for his pro day. And he has a good pro day, and there are other guys shining. Baker Mayfield outshined him. Josh Allen outshined him. Lamar Jackson had some good and bad moments at the combine, better pro day. But, they had their whole misgivings about Lamar Jackson, which came to be wrong in the end. But at the end of the day, they were very wrong about Sam Darnold because the warning flags about his play were there. And those same turnovers have plagued him throughout his career, whether it was with the Jets, whether it was with Carolina, and even in his limited time with San Francisco last year. So I think what they have to look at is say, if we're going to be a very ball control offense where we let the defense manage the game for us, we use the running game, we use the short control passing, but that doesn't fit your receiving core. Your receiving core is an attacking receiving core. So that means he's got to throw the ball down the field where he tends to hold the ball too long and get sack fumbles, or he forces balls into coverage and throws interceptions. So it doesn't look like you set yourself up for success this year. It may be another high draft year for Minnesota.
So let's talk about one more team, and then we'll see if you've got any other teams you'd like to talk about. But I thought it was kind of curious that once again they have Kansas City as the favorite to win another Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And they draft Worthy, who gives them that deep threat wide receiver that they didn't have last year.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, if anything else, it makes their offense even more dangerous. But yet they get put into marginally worse. How do you go marginally worse when you're the favorite to win another Super Bowl?
Yeah, I didn't understand that one either. I mean, Xavier Worthy is going to give them the most dynamic option they've had since Tyreek Hill. He's a guy who can beat you straight away on the vertical, running that deep over with people running over the top of that defense is going to allow him to create catch balls in space and run away from people. Xavier Worthy was, to me, one of the best receivers at Texas last year. So the fact they were able to get him when they got him and what he's going to be able to do in that offense, I think that's where you look at it and say they've gotten so much better because they did it last year with a pedestrian receiving core, right? We talked about the drops all regular season. They didn't drop the ball in the playoffs. They won the Super Bowl. Now you got a guy who could actually hurt you again, and that's not named Travis Kelce. So I think that's where you look at it and go, okay, they're better. I don't know why they put them in the worst category. I don't look at this roster and say they're worse. I think they had a solid draft, a solid offseason with free agency. They came back. They got pieces that they needed. They already have a Super Bowl proven team. Now you're going to add pieces that they didn't have last year when they made that big run to the Super Bowl. I think they're just as dangerous, if not more dangerous this year.
Yeah, the one I look at too is Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, you lost Jason Kelce, which is a big loss in your offensive line. You lose Swift, you bring in Barkley, but Barkley's got quite a bit of tread on the tires. He's lost a lot of tread on the tires, had injury problems. So that was another one that was kind of a head scratcher for me.
I'll tell you why they're better. While Swift was the guy who had way more tread on his tires than Barkley, Barkley's the better player. And even at this stage of his career, I think the biggest issue we have with Saquon Barkley is the injury history more than it is the amount of carries he's had. He hasn't had an exorbitant amount of carries. I think it's more the injuries, the knee, the ankle injuries that he's had that have cut his season short, that have really kind of made teams feel a certain way about him. But they showed you in free agency how they really felt about him. He came right off the board just like that in free agency because teams did value that he was one of the few all-around backs in free agency. So I think he's an upgrade for Philadelphia. One, he gives them everything that Swift couldn't do. He can run inside the tackles. He can run outside the tackles. He can run in short yardage. He can run 20 to 20. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can give you all the explosive plays that Swift gave you. But he doesn't have to carry the load anymore. With the Giants, he was the guy that was the linchpin of that offense. He won't have to be in Philadelphia with the guys he has around him, those receivers, that tight end, the other running backs that are there that will help him carry the load, and that quarterback that he can run zone read with and make big plays. So I think he opens up this Eagles offense even more than what Swift did. So I think that's the dangerous thing about Philadelphia there. They were able to replace a lot on defense. Their secondary improved overnight by having two of the top corners in this draft. So, I mean, Howie Roseman in this draft, I mean, he was picking running backs in this draft late on day 3 that you could go in some of these backfields and start. Okay, so they are a very, very talented bunch in Philadelphia. The offseason with the free agency and then the draft just improved this team even more. If they can stay healthy, I think the biggest challenge for this team is going to be the coordinators. If these coordinators, because one thing when you do with coordinators, when you make these changes, is situations. Now we know how good their defensive coordinator, their new defensive coordinator is. He's almost a legend of the modern coaches. So how fast his scheme comes around, how they adapt and do things in Philadelphia, what he's trying to do is going to be the question. If it takes them 3-4 weeks to get that defense to where they want it to be, they may have some struggles early, but they'll come around. Offensively, it's going to be about situations. Can they manage third downs better? Can they manage the red zone better? Can they do a better job of protecting their quarterback versus the blitz? These are going to be the things that you have to look at. Kelsey was a big portion of that because he called a lot of protection at the line of scrimmage. He's not there anymore. Cam Jurgens is going to have to do that now. So there are going to be certain changes that we're going to have to look for to see how it affects this offense, how it affects this defense. Those are going to be the things. But talent-wise, they have the most talented roster in NFC East.
One question for you. Give me two surprise teams and two teams that you think are going to have a real rough year that maybe people thought might be better.
Okay, so I think a surprise team to me, I'm going to say, as much as people are really high on the Atlanta Falcons, don't sleep on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Okay, like I said, the fact that they maintained a lot of the guys that they were dreading to lose. They got Mike Evans back. They got Baker Mayfield back. They were able to keep Chris Godwin, and they were able to keep the safety, Antoine Winfield Jr. There was a lot of stress over which one was going to leave, how many were going to leave, how would they replace those guys. They were able to bring in a lot of help for those guys. They were able to improve their backfield, adding a Bucky Irving, another explosive back to that backfield. I think, like I said, Tampa Bay is a team that people are saying, they're going to fall back this year with how good Atlanta is going to be. Don't be surprised if Tampa Bay is still hanging around for the division title at the end of the season. A team that I think that's going to fall off. When I think about it, I'm worried. I think that they'll be around at the end, but they have the potential to fall off as Jacksonville. When you look at the improvement of the Houston Texans, I trust Jacksonville's offense a little more versus the Houston defense than I do the Jacksonville defense versus the Houston Texans offense. I think the Houston Texans got a lot better with the moves they made this offseason. I think they've done enough to surpass Jacksonville. Jacksonville is a very small defense, a small speed defense. I think Houston has done enough to upgrade on their offense to be able to be a little more physical. They're going to make it hard for Jacksonville to keep up with them. And if they have injuries, if Trevor Lawrence goes down. Now, granted, you got Mac Jones, but once again, is he going to play up to the level of a Trevor Lawrence? That's the question. So they have a lot more questions. You can't lose certain guys. You can't lose Christian Kirk. He's still their only receiver that can catch and get big yards after the catch. You lose him again, you lose that ability. That's one of the things that got Trevor Lawrence hurt last year, not having him. Travis Etienne is finally coming all the way out, but if you lose him, what do you lose behind him? Nobody is a dual threat player on that roster that can help that offense. So they have a lot less to work with than Houston, who has added on to what they had last year, survived losing their best receiver in Tutu Atwell. So I think when you look at those two teams, if major injuries hit Jacksonville, they're in trouble.
Okay, now on to the next category that I think one of us, that guy over there, is not very happy about this next category as to what is unfolded. But there's three of us on this show that are really interested to see what you have to say about the rookie quarterbacks and one in particular. So, Chad, I'll let you roll out on these rookie quarterbacks, and let's pay close attention to Caleb Williams, would you?
Well, Jeff, thanks for being here with us tonight. This is a lot of fun. We want to talk about the glitz and glamour of the NFL and the new baby darlings of the NFL. Tell us what you think about these young quarterbacks that were drafted. Sounds like at least three of them are going to be starting so far: Caleb, Jaden, and now Bo. Just give us a little bit on each one of them, if you could.
Well, we'll start with the low-hanging fruit. We'll start with Caleb Williams. QB1 on my board in this draft. I think he had the ability to be pro-ready no matter where he went. I think going to Chicago, at the time he went to Chicago, where they're committed to actually adding talent to help your quarterback, was the best situation to happen for him. The additions they've made this offseason, not only adding a Keenan Allen, like I said, you already had a Cole Kmet. Letting Darnell Mooney walk, why did you draft a Roma Dunze? So I think they added enough talent to go along with him in his play style. Yes, he's going to be moving around like Justin Fields, but he's a better thrower of football on the move than Justin Fields is. So, and that's just not saying anything bad about Justin Fields because he could throw on the move, but he's a way better thrower of the football because he has the ability to contort his body and make throws off balance accurately, as opposed to Justin, who has to gather his feet a little bit more and make those throws off balance. So you saw it in the preseason. He can go out there and do things with his legs and buy time, and that stuff's going to be incorporated into this offense because when guys don't get open fast enough, go out there and save the day. They trust that he's not going to go out there and take too many hits. They trust that he's going to get out of bounds. He's going to throw balls away when he has to. We saw that at USC. He had to do the whole thing at USC. He won't have to do it all here. I think Keenan Allen's going to allow him to throw on time at points in this offense. I think Roma Dunze is going to create so many opportunities for these guys in immediate and vertical that's going to help him out as well. In a vertical threat again. So I think overall, he's in the right situation to succeed. Now, it may not translate into double-digit wins this year, but you'll see the wins grow each year.
Could you I want to touch on something else in Chicago. What'd you think of Keenan Allen coming in at 235, 25 pounds heavier than he's ever played before? What'd you think?
Yeah, with the year that he had last year with the injuries, that kind of happens. Some guys either shed weight or put on a little extra weight. So Keenan Allen, he's not a burner, right? Keenan Allen's a route guy. He's going to route you to death and create separation that way. So as long as he doesn't lose that short area quickness and explosiveness, as long as he's a savvy veteran that knows how to shake a defender off on the route, I think he'll be fine. He may have done it to bulk up, take some of the hits that he's been taking over the years. So that may have been more of it. And also, I think some of that will come off the more he runs. As you get to the season, a lot of guys tend to get lighter than they are start of the season anyway.
Okay.
So,
What do
Jade,
you
go ahead.
What do you think, Jaden?
So I think he's another one at best situation. We talk about Cliff Kingsbury being the offensive coordinator. If I'm Washington and I've got Cliff Kingsbury, do I want Drake May or do I want Jaden Daniels? I'm going to take Jaden Daniels because he fits exactly what he likes to do. He's that mobile quarterback who can throw on a run and do all the things he likes to do with that air raid offense. While Drake May can move, this is a guy who's consistently done it in college football. He knows that offense. He played in it at LSU. It's one of those things where he's the best fit for him. I think he's going to be fine. Once again, Washington got better this year. I don't think they're marginally better. I think they'll be, a couple of wins better than they were last year. They weren't a horrible team last year. They just had a lot of guys that they banked on that didn't work out for. One of the guys they banked on, I thought was going to be an excellent corner at this level, has struggled so far, is the corner out of Mississippi State that they drafted, Emmanuel Forbes. I thought Emmanuel Forbes he's one of my top 3 corners in that draft class. So far has struggled at the NFL levels, giving up a lot of big plays, gotten penalized a lot. So in training camp, he's had a lot of those issues still. So I think, if Emmanuel Forbes and guys like that they drafted can come out to form, this team will rise a lot faster, but they need those young players to come around. And that's where they're at right now. Until those guys get consistently better, they're going to have their struggles.
So you think Jaden Daniels was a good pick for my dynasty
Commanders, yes.
team?
Absolutely. He was at the time when they were picking, he's the best quarterback on the board.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think about the other starter, Bo Nix?
So Bo Nix, I think, is an interesting situation. With Denver, we see the turnover that they're going through. I think he brings the most excitement to that offense. We know that they have Zach Wilson and all those guys, but Bo Nix brings a different level of excitement with the things that he can do with the football, and I think that's what Sean Payton is banking on. He needs somebody that's going to be able to save the day when things break down. He doesn't have that. Zach Wilson's not going to be able to save the day with him. He's going to, if you give him a clean pocket and no receivers, he's going to light you up all day. But we saw it with the Jets, when you needed him to save the day, he may pull out a run or two, but most of the time he wasn't able to perform. So you look at the rest of their quarterbacks, they're just guys. So I think what they had to go with Bo Nix. He had the most upside. He's the one that can possibly create some things for you. Their running game is going to be a little inconsistent because I think that offensive line is still in flux. In the receiving core, they're still trying to sort out. You got Cortland Sutton there, and a few other guys, but not a consistency outside of him. So, plus the injuries that Tim Patrick had kind of robbed him of a lot of things last year, where he finally started to get on track late in the season. So, I think Bo Nix, if they can continue to build around him, get quality talent to continue to build that organization, I think he will also improve. But I think he's going to be the guy that's going to get the call because, plain and simple, they don't have anybody else that they can lean on to save that offense when it gets in trouble.
And the big faller in the draft kind of was Drake May. He was going to be number 1, and he was going to be number 2, and then he fell down to 10 or 11 or 12 or something. What do you about Drake and how he's looked so far this preseason? I thought the second game he looked a little better than he did in the first game.
They went 1, 2, 3 in the draft, and I think New England got their guy, and I think New England's playing it smart. You don't have to put him out there. And can he start right now? Yes, he can. Does it make them any better than they're going to be? No. And because New England's got a lot of questions, right? Who's their starting receivers? Who's he going to be throwing to consistently? We're not seeing that in the preseason right now. We're not seeing anybody consistently open. So that's been their problem for the past 2-3 years. They've added some veterans. They've added some young guys. But at the end of the day, with New England, Drake may be the guy that benefits from sitting a year, letting them sort out this team, letting them sort out this offense, or even sitting 5, 6, 7 games, right? You let Jacoby Brissett go out there and get beat up early while he learns, and then he goes out there and gets some on-the-field training before next year where you really get a better team around him. So I think New England is one of the slowest developing of those teams, and Drake May doesn't have to be rushed out there, and they're not trying to rush him out there. They know they got Brissett and everybody else. But I'll tell you what, one of the most intriguing quarterbacks on that roster is Morton. And so he's the one who's shown a lot of progress so far. So I think he's a guy that he's going to hang around for a few years. And if Drake May ever struggles, he may be the guy that supplants him in the future. So that's the one great situation there in New England to have 2 young quarterbacks to develop, not just one.
Yeah, he could be the Kirk Cousins of the team and just kind of snake in there if he struggles too much.
Yeah, when Drake May was on the board, I just had flashbacks of Mitch Trubisky, North Carolina. I just couldn't do it. Oh my God, just don't draft him. I don't even care. He might be the best out there. Just don't draft him. I can't do it.
He's a talented quarterback. I think the one knock you can really have on him in college, besides the lack of experience, basically, is the fact that they had a lot of close games, a lot of big moments where he didn't exactly shine. And that's something that you kind of hold against a guy, in those situations in college and he doesn't produce. You're going to do it at the next level. You're just going to magically turn it on. So you want to see guys kind of produce in those moments. North Carolina came up short in a lot of games where he had chances and it just didn't happen. So I think what you want to see in New England is if they can get that defense right, they can get that running game stable, that offensive line, and they can find guys to get open. Eventually, you may see him this season, but I wouldn't rush him on the field if you don't have to.
It seems like one of the big things he needs to work on probably is his footwork. From what I'm hearing during the games, is they point out his footwork a lot, and he really has got to get that under control. What do you think?
Yeah, the hard part for most quarterbacks, especially the younger ones, is when you're playing in the preseason, you're 90% of the time you're not playing with your starting offensive line. So you're playing with a bunch of guys who are trying to make the team just like you, and those guys are not as good as the normal starters. They don't play together as a unit much, so there's a lot of things that they miss. So you're not stable in the pocket. If you're watching the Dallas games, you saw Trey Lance, the inconsistencies he's had. It's the same thing, right? A guy who's not totally comfortable with the guys blocking for him. He can have a back swinging out of the backfield where all he has to do is plant his feet, set, open the hips, and throw. But instead he hops, and chucks it out there and it goes into the ground. Why? Because he's not comfortable with what's around him. So he's not going through the processes of following through your throws, going through your mechanics. That's something that a lot of quarterbacks, even some of the veterans do, when they don't trust the guys around them. When you're around the starting line and you trust those guys, you tend to play better. So I think eventually they'll get to that point, but that's the hard part about preseason when you're watching guys. Even Kyle Trask in Tampa for the last couple of years, people go, oh, my God, he's horrible. Well, look who he's playing behind. Look who he's throwing to. Those guys aren't getting open on time, and they're not protecting him. So he looks bad. This year he looks a lot better because he trusts the guys playing around him. He's throwing on time. He's fitting balls in the windows. When you are able to trust the guys blocking for you, when you can trust the guys going to get open when you need them to get open, you tend to be a better quarterback and follow your mechanics.
What'd you think of Atlanta and their shocking pick of Michael Penix and sliding that in under Kirk Cousins' nose there?
Well, we were kind of dumbfounded on draft night. And it wasn't for the fact that they took Penix. Listen, my QB2 on the board was Michael Penix. But actually, no, it wasn't my QB2. It was my QB4, sorry. But what I didn't understand was you just paid this guy $100-something million guaranteed, and you're going to take him at 9. If you would have gotten him at 32, I could understand that. But at 9, when you can get an impact player to go along with your $100 million guaranteed quarterback, I thought that made more sense. Now, I get why they do it. When they explained it, it made sense. However, if I'm Kirk Cousins and I'm here and I'm coming here to get you to the playoffs this year, I'm going to want that edge rusher. I'm going to want that extra receiver. I'm going to want that extra offensive lineman. I'm going to want that guy that's going to be out there with me trying to get me into the playoffs right now, not the guy that's potentially my replacement in 3 years. So I understand how Kirk Cousins felt. I understand how most fans felt going, what? And when we look at the value for the pick, it didn't make sense either, but it makes sense to Atlanta. They want to be able to transition to the next quarterback seamlessly as opposed to having to go through this again in 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah, I thought one of the best parts was the cutaway to the draft room and the GM trying to explain to Arthur Blank why this was a good pick.
Yes.
Arthur Blank just standing there going. So he was more puzzled than all of us, I think.
Yeah,
that meme went viral.
Yeah, I just wrote $100-something million guaranteed check. You know what I'm saying? Why am I getting a quarterback at 9? Most owners are going to feel that way.
Yeah. I get it. No, I get it. And then touch on the last one. New Orleans took Spencer Rattler to. How do you think he's been looking? I'm not a big Derek Carr guy. I think Spencer Rattler's got a chance to make some noise if he gets a shot. What do you think?
Yeah, he's got potential. He's definitely a different player from when he first started in Oklahoma. The arm talent is there. It's always been there. The question with him was always between the ears, right? So we've never seen a consistently good Spencer Rattler, and that's been the issue when you were drafting. So getting him where they got him was good value. He's a project, a potential starter or a potential long-term backup, but he has everything you're looking for. He's a lot better than having Taysom Hill as your backup, So I think that's the best thing about him is he's a potentially good starter for you in the future. You paid the money for Derek Carr. You believe he's going to be your quarterback for now. You've got a transition plan in the future with Spencer Rattler, if you believe he develops the way you want him to develop, and there's no pressure for him to start right now. Taking him where they took him was a good thing.
Sounds good.
Let's go ahead and take a short break, and when we come back, we'll move into questions that Brett has for you.
Oh,
we're gonna have to
hang on.
We're gonna have to pick up the pace a little bit, or we're gonna be here till midnight. So,
hang on for this one, Jeff. You might need a bathroom break or something. He's gonna be loaded.
I'm good.
Yeah, we'll be right back. are back for hour 2.
You better buckle up here, Jeff, because I can look at him cracking his knuckles. He's ready to go. This next little discussion, I'm going to give you a little background on this because as he's working it out here, with the NIL and the transfer portal, not something that is Brett's favorite category, not something he's a huge supporter of, but definitely something that, as a scout, you're probably dealing with as well when you're looking at these guys. So, without further ado, Brett, the floor is yours.
Woo! All right. Of course, I'm the big college guy on the panel. My thing is something Coach Saban had mentioned before this was even passed with the portal in the NIL, and I've brought it up on the show before. The whole rich are going to get richer, and what's done is done. My issue is, we used to know these. We grew up watching football in the South. College football down here means everything. You don't understand. It means everything. And it's that way in Louisiana. It's that way in Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Gainesville, Tallahassee. It's just that way. It's hard to describe to folks. And so we knew all these rosters backwards and forwards, and now it's worse to me than the NFL when it comes to it's just total free agency. These guys, we've got some that's going to go to 4 colleges in 4 years, 5 in 5 years. And then the whole NIL, Isaiah Bond, right? Ex-Alabama wide receiver, 4th and 31 in Auburn. We were beat. Our center killed us all year, bad snaps. We were done. I was out here chunking furniture out in the yard. And they pull off that miracle touchdown play to Bond. Daniel Moore's already going to do a print of it. He's a living legend. He'll never have to pay for anything around Tuscaloosa, Birmingham ever again. And Texas and Sarkeesian picks up the phone and offers him a car and money, and he's gone. And it's like, it's hard. And me and the fellas have talked about this on the show before and behind the scenes. And I just don't see, and me and some of my other buddies talk about this, SEC buddies, how is this sustainable to you? Because, yes, Texas is always going to have the advantage over any other school. They've got that oil money. They've got more money than the Lord himself. But so many of these guys that are 5 stars, 4 stars, we're going to pay you this. You get a car, you get $500,000. We'll rent you a house. We'll get this person in school for you. Well, a lot of these guys, Jeff, aren't going to pan out. And like even the coaches and the assistants are saying now, it's like the wild, wild west. The Baylor coach is we pay players on the T-shirt. I'm a man, I'm 40. Gundy at Oklahoma State yesterday goes on another rant and says he's got agents still calling him, want more money, and he's having to tell the players to tell the agent, no, the portal's closed. Negotiations are over. We'll talk again at the end of the season. What's your thoughts on this portal, or let's start with the NIL, the NIL, being sustainable at this point? Because the Oregon guy, the Nike guy with Oregon, he said, look, I'm getting on up there. I'm going to do what it takes, pay what kind of money it takes so I can see my school win a national championship. Then we have the Yellowwood guy at Auburn that's just ponying up money. Then, we've got the people in Texas. Every kitty has a bottom to it. Every piggy bank has a bottom to it. And do you think at some point this is a sustainable system? And will it ever be regulated?
It will.
What are your thoughts on it?
It will eventually. Unfortunately, things go from one extreme to the next before they get fixed in the middle, right?
Right.
So the one thing I don't like to say is NIL and all this stuff killed college football, because college football died when it became a multi-billion-dollar business. once the big TV contracts, the video games, and the schools started getting all that money, we started seeing the death of real college football, right? When's the last time we've had an Arizona team compete possibly for a national championship?
Well, see, and I'm born and raised here in Tuscaloosa, and I have seen Tuscaloosa just explode. I mean, when I was a little kid, Bryant Denny had 63,000 seats in the stadium. Now we're got 102, and they're already talking to contractors about lowering the field and adding a few more thousand. I mean, condos are blowing up. The town is blown up. If you moved away from Tuscaloosa 20 years ago and moved back today, you wouldn't recognize it. I mean, and it's like that at a lot of college campuses.
Yeah, you think about, are we ever going to see another Georgia Tech national championship? Probably not.
Georgia Tech and Virginia in the same year, wasn't it? Or no?
Like, same decade, I think it was. Yeah, but you're not going to see that anymore, right? Because you've already seen the separation. You got the Power 5, or now Power 4, because there's no more Pac-12, and the Group of 5, right? So you've already seen the separation in what Division I used to be is no longer what it is. You've got super conferences now, right? But that was already happening once the money came into college football. Once money flowed and the universities were making all of this money, especially the bigger schools, okay? Other schools couldn't compete, right? If you're Iowa, you have to live off of what you've been, your tradition, because you can't match an Oregon with the combinations they got and the money they got coming through that program. You can't match USC with the money that they've got coming through that program.
Ohio State.
Yeah, you got to stick to. When's the last time we've actually taken an Iowa quarterback and said, "Wow, this guy's a potential first round"? We haven't done that in decades. Okay, so it's because, plain and simple, you have to sell kids on your school, which means you got to put money into the program. And while Iowa is a big money program, it's not big money compared to Ohio State. It's not big money compared to those schools. So once the schools started really raking in the business aspect of this, and eventually it was going to get down to the point where the kids said, "Hey, how are you making all of this and we can't make nothing?" So they came up with a bad plan. So they said, well, the easiest way to do it is, since not everybody can pay a kid, let them get paid for their name, image, and likeness, not realizing that what was going on under the table is now going to happen right in front of your face, right? So there were people, boosters, giving kids this money anyway. And even Justin Fields recently admitted that I made more money before NIL. Right? So there were kids getting the money anyway when they didn't have NIL. Now they're getting it right in front of everybody's faces. And it makes it even worse because now you're this big-time coach like a Dabo, and you could have kids making just as much money as you.
What about the portal? Do you think that the portal is going to help even the playing field any? I know down here in the SEC, they call Lane Kiffin the portal king. And they, if you've ever been to Oxford, Mississippi, I mean, it's just a little hole in the wall college town. They don't have the kind of money or boosters or things like that in Oxford, but he continues to put a top 10, top 12 program, product on the field. And a lot of it is him snatching up so many different kids that are unhappy with playing time, in the portal. Do you think that'll help even the playing field, so to speak, to where it's not Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and Texas playing for the championship every year? Or
it'll eventually settle itself out. The portal's main thing was it gave players a little more power. Remember, if you wanted to transfer, you had to transfer down or sit a year, right? So the portal is taking that option away. So that kind of emboldens the players. So the players are feeling that movement now. Eventually, you'll get a little bit of a slowdown, but not much. The reason why now is giving you the same aspects of the pro game in the college game. Basically, your portal is now for your free agency. Okay? If you want to improve your team faster, do you wait for that high school kid who's got to sit a couple of years before he's productive? Or do you pull from somebody else's program? Or do you pull from a lower program? Because what you're getting is a lot of high school kids that would normally have gotten scholarship offers are going lower and then transferring up. So they're getting college experience. You're getting more players that can help you win faster by going through the portal. So it's kind of, they're emulating the pro model now with that. Your NIL is your draft in a sense, right? You're going out there and you're drafting money to get some of these kids that have to decide between 4 and 5 schools. Now it's not on prestige and what promises you can make. It's about what collective come up with the most money. All right. So it's going to help them and their family. And as much as I hate people demonize the kids, the parents are involved in this too. The parents put a lot of money in some of these kids with all the programs and 7-on-7s, and they consider that an investment. So if they can get that money back at college rather than wait until they get to possibly the NFL, then they're going to do it then too. So that's where that's also coming from. The parents are like, well, shoot, if I could get paid to send my kid to college, I'm going to do that rather than paying or getting him there to go for free and still have to chuck out money when he needs to eat. So I think what they're doing now is that's the business side is impacted now. The kids, the parents, and the families. You're not seeing the hardships running to the NFL anymore. I think what you're seeing with NIL is kids don't have to leave in 3 years anymore to go to the NFL. They can stay for 4 years and 5 years and enjoy that NIL money and put together a good college career and then go to the NFL. So that's another aspect that's not really talked about as much, but it's starting to happen.
Yeah, I remember the kid that played Gonzaga, the basketball kid that seemed like he played there 12 years. He said, I was going to make more money at Gonzaga as a senior as opposed to getting drafted in the second round by the NBA. So, I mean, I have heard stories like that.
And you're seeing that. I mean, if I'm going to get drafted in the 4th round, why go now? I can make an extra $3 million this year as opposed to getting drafted in the 4th round and getting $900K. So I think what you're seeing is the kids are going to weigh their options and decide whether I'm going to leave or stay. If I'm a first-round pick, you're going to bolt and take that every time because plain and simple, an injury can change all that next year. So it's going to bring more business decisions for the kids into it as opposed to it being emotional decisions. My daddy went to Alabama. I'm going to play for Alabama. I want to play for Nick Saban. Well, that kind of got lost when all these coaches started bouncing around. To me, the one thing college football has not fixed is the fact that in the NFL, you can't break your contract to go to another team. That team needs to be compensated. You can break your contract at any time in college football, and then nobody's going to say anything about it. But to me, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. If you're under contract, that's the ultimate non-compete clause. How do you go from one school to another with no repercussions?
It's just like the bowl games now, man. You're getting NIL money, but you decide you're not going to play in the bowl game. Well, they ought to fix those collectives. Say, well, that's fine then. You'll give us 50% or 25% of the money back.
And the other part about it is that's also not seen. Also is you talked about the contracts. There's a lot of things in some of these NIL deals that are not very beneficial to the kid. So they're really struggling with that because they're believing they're coming in. It's this way. And whoever their agent isn't cashing it either. And at the end of the day, when they decide to transfer or leave early, all of a sudden they wind up owing the school money or that collective money. So there's also that aspect of it where once again, they're still catching the kids because you're catching a naivete. At that age, most of these people and most of these agents that they're recruiting aren't usually top-end agents. So they're able to slide things into that NIL deal that they're not familiar with. So all that will eventually flesh itself out. But it's going to take a long time before, like I said, you went from one extreme where nobody got paid but the schools. Now everybody's getting paid and it's the wild, wild west. Eventually it'll fall back to the middle when they figure things out. But the worst part about it is the NCAA is always slow to pick up the ball. So they're not going to be the ones that figure it out. It's going to wind up being the schools and the conferences that figure it out first. Because as you've seen, they talked about revenue sharing. Well, not every school has the ability to revenue share. So that automatically makes it the haves and have-nots. So, while it would make sense because then it would eliminate the NIL issue, you still can't stop an 18-year-old who's technically adult by law from making money off his name, image, and likeness. You can't do it. So then that was the issue that they had, why all that stuff happened in the first place. They had all these kids. You're selling video games with these kids on it, but yet they ain't getting any money off it. That's a violation of the law. And that's what bit them in the rear end. They got greedy. And unfortunately, the people who weren't getting anything said, wait, where's our cut?
Right.
So I think
all right,
now,
we better move along
now
here.
it's time to turn the page, and we need to start our breakdown of the. We'll start off with the AFC North, just to kind of set the stage as far as my eyes, anyway. I look at Baltimore Ravens as again being the class of the division. I think they're going to end up at the top. I think you're going to find Cincinnati and Cleveland kind of duking it out for the middle. And I see Pittsburgh taking a pretty good step backwards this year. What do you guys think?
I agree with the Steelers at the bottom. The Wilson Fields thing. I mean, I don't know, and I'll leave this to Jeff as to who he thinks is gonna be the starter. But I tell you what, if Cincinnati can stay healthy, if Joe Burrow can stay healthy, Cincinnati's gonna be a real tough out for Baltimore. I actually have, if that in that scenario, I've got Cincinnati ahead of the Ravens. Obviously, I think they're both playoff teams, but I mean, if Burrow, I'm a big, when I evaluate these divisions, I kind of look at the quarterbacks. You got Jackson, Burrow, Watson in Cleveland, and then the back and forth mess in Pittsburgh. So, I mean, if Burrow can stay healthy, I really think that Cleveland or Cincinnati can really give them a run. But so I could easily see Cincinnati winning the division just as easily as Baltimore could. So, and I think Cleveland and then the Steelers bring it up. But what do you think, Jeff?
Oh, this is going to be a fun division to watch because they're going to beat up on each other pretty bad. The only reason I have Pittsburgh bringing up the rear is because of the issues they're already having. They've already got injury issues on the offensive line in the backfield where they desperately need it. That's affecting their quarterback competition because let's be realistic. Russell Wilson is not the same Russell Wilson. He's not as mobile. He's not as elusive. And when you get to that point, when you're that kind of quarterback that relied on all that stuff, you have to reinvent yourself, and he hasn't done that yet. He's going to be forced to go back to the early Russell Wilson, which was check down, take the safe throw. And they're trying to get away from that in Pittsburgh, right? They're trying to become that dynamic team that attacks down the field. So to me, I think it eventually, if it's not the first game, it'll be by week 4 or 5, it'll be, Justin Fields starting for them at quarterback. I do think they'll have a winning record. I think it'll be another maybe 9-8 year for Pittsburgh, but I don't think that they'll do higher than 4th. I think Cincinnati and Cleveland are going to duke it out for second. Depends on which one's healthier and playing better at the end of the season. And I think Baltimore will be the one that squeaks away with the division because they're going to beat each other up pretty bad. These teams are all they're all good at beating each other. When it comes to outside the division, they can have their strengths and weaknesses. I just think that Pittsburgh just finds a way to keep getting above that 500 mark. And now there is no more 500 since it's a 17-game season. I think they'll squeeze in there at 9-8 at the end. But my questions with Cincinnati is you lost Joe Mixon, you replaced him with some other guys. You're hoping that the young backs can give you the dual threat option that he did. Zach Moss is a good tackle runner, but he's not overall a great pass catcher out of the backfield like Joe Mixon was. Joe Mixon may not have been a great pass blocker, but that dual threat option was a problem for defenses that they had to account for. So it doesn't make it any easier on Joe Burrow. His receivers are still there. His tight end room is pretty good. I just think that defensively, their defense ain't as good as Cleveland's or Baltimore's. So that's one of the things I look at as well. Cleveland, you already got injury issues going on there with Deshaun Watson. Nick Chubb isn't back yet. So they're going to start off with some issues as well. So the team that gets out the gate fastest and can maintain that momentum for most of the season is going to be the team that takes the lead in this division. I don't see that happening with Pittsburgh, maybe Cincinnati. I don't see it happening with Cleveland, but I can't see it happening with Baltimore.
I think Cincinnati's going to have a hard time. I know, Eric, that you were talking about them as maybe a dark horse, but I think their defense was their Achilles heel last year. I don't know that they've done enough to shore that up. To be able to with you got a lot of stout defenses in the AFC North between Baltimore, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. Cincinnati's got a lot of room they got to make up to compete defense.
Yeah, and I'm not saying Baltimore's not winning the division. I'm just saying I think Cincinnati has an opportunity. If Joe Burrow stays healthy, has an opportunity to put a scare in them, and you never know. No, I would definitely say, I had them down. I have Baltimore Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. But let's not sleep on Cincinnati. I think you're right. The defense is certainly, I would say, you could even argue that the Bengals is last as far as defense goes. But I mean, we'll see how it plays out. Chad, any disagreements?
Yeah, I think Cincinnati is going to win the division. I think Joe Burrow is special. I don't throw those words around. I don't throw great around. I don't throw elite around. I think Joe Burrow is elite. I think he is in the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league. That kid can do it all. They just have to keep him on his feet and give him a chance. And then when he's throwing it to Jamar Chase, who's second, third best receiver in the league, it's just a fantastic combination. Anybody should want. Baltimore, I just think they cheat Lamar Jackson every year. Every offseason, they're going to get him weapons. And every offseason, they don't. And they depend on him to work his magic all the time. And sooner or later, he is so elusive and he's so hard to hit. But one of these times, some 270-pound dude is just going to crush him, and his shoulders are going to be gone.
I think it's a crime. I think it's a crime what they're doing to that kid that they don't. Go ahead. I 100% agree with you. I think over the course of Lamar Jackson's career and all of the, kind of the, I don't want to say beating, but some of the negative that he gets from the media and people along those lines, I 100% agree with you. I think Lamar Jackson has been the biggest, just the guy that they have done so little for. I think when the dust settles on his career, whatever happens, Super Bowl or not, we're going to look back and understand just how special of a player he was with what he was doing it with.
Mm-hmm.
You take Lamar Jackson and you put him on the Bears today. What are we talking about? We're talking about the Bears in the Super Bowl. But Lamar Jackson does not have what Caleb Williams has in front of him to do that with. So I just think he's been the one that, man, Brock Purdy obviously has a horseshoe, up him, and then Caleb Williams having, you know what I mean? Like, you see these quarterbacks and what they come into, and obviously you still have to take advantage of that situation. I mean, Purdy obviously did the job, but Lamar Jackson wasn't looking at that. Even Justin Fields was not looking at that when he started with the Bears. So, I mean, I just think Lamar Jackson with 2 MVPs and everything that he has is still. Baltimore has always been that team. Well, we're gonna take care of this year. Oh, maybe next year. Oh, maybe the year after that.
And they just constantly do him dirty. But
and it's more about what they've done, right? So you think about it. They said they're going to get him help. They would get him an older receiver, or they get him a young receiver who may or may not fit what they do. I think the one mistake
they reach on.
Yeah, they made a mistake at the time when they took Bateman because they were using an offense that was heavy run. It didn't fit having a Bateman, right? Rashad Bateman. Now it fits having Todd Monken as offensive coordinator. So, but he's not been healthy. So that's one of the major issues there. They did get the slot receiver to replace Brown. That was an upgrade. So that was a huge thing. He made a stupid mistake in the playoff game that cost him. But overall, he was the light at the end of the tunnel with that receiving core. They have 2 excellent tight ends that can do everything from get the possession catches, block, and hit you down the field. But you want to see more from that receiving core. But I think the difference this year is he got the perfect complement in the backfield in Henry. And it's because, plain and simple, now when you think of him running the football and you think about him pulling it, this guy can hurt you no matter what. He can hurt you from the 20s. He can hurt you in the end zone. And then you have to think about, Lamar Jackson pulling it on some of those runs. Or you have to worry about him dumping it off to this guy in space on a screen who a big defense, linebacker, outside linebacker, edge rusher type body coming at you in space. So I think that was the best thing they could have done for him at the time, because it still allows them to maintain that identity of a run team and a play action team. It's going to open up the world for those two tight ends that they have that are a tough matchup for everybody. I think it's going to get them a lot of a lot of heavier boxes that he can do a lot more with less coverage behind it. Because if you try to play a light box versus Henry, he's going to hurt you. So teams are going to have to close up the box and give him a lot less complicated coverage behind it, which will make it easier on Lamar Jackson on the play action passes.
Maybe. I mean, I'm not sold. Derrick Henry, I mean, we'll see. But he's at that age and he's at those miles where, I mean, it could be week 2, it could be the end of next season when he falls off the cliff. But I mean, it's a crapshoot once you get to be that age, and the poundings he has delivered and gotten delivered upon him because he's so big. Like my man Earl Campbell, at one point he just had taken too many hits and just couldn't do it anymore.
And Eddie George was the same way, although his fall off was a lot faster. But the beautiful thing is they don't need him to be 2,000-yard, Derrick Henry anymore. They just need him to be 1,200 to 1,500-yard Derrick Henry and be the guy that's going to give them the option in the running game to take the pressure off their quarterback, so he doesn't have to take the beatings anymore. And I think that's what they're looking at, because as much as they wanted that to be J.K. Dobbins, they were always afraid of the injury. And he had some freakish injuries the last couple of years that kind of robbed him of a lot of production. But J.K. Dobbins was a stud for them and a big find. It just came down to money and injuries for him.
Yeah, he just couldn't stay healthy. And then in third, I got Pittsburgh. I think Fields is going to grab that starting role, and I think he's going to play better than good. And he's gonna give him a shot at the playoffs. You can shake your heads all you want.
So
my man Jeff backed me up.
So are you
earlier today?
So are you telling me, Chad, Pittsburgh the last 4 years, team offense, they went from 12th to 21st to 26th to 28th. So their offense has been a steady decline over the last 4 years. And you're telling me Russell Wilson and Justin Fields is going to be the answer to their woes that are going to get them back towards 500? I don't see it.
Yeah, as opposed to Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett. Yeah, I do. I do.
Hey, easy. Jeff had Kenny Pickett rated really high.
Yeah, well, that didn't work out for anybody.
Unfortunately for Kenny Pickett, he was in the class that I didn't have a first-round grade on a quarter.
And I think Cleveland's going to bring up the rear. I think Deshaun Watson, he was so good. He was so freaking good. I didn't say it. And then all those off the field problems, I don't know if he's ever going to be able to recover from that. And they're so tied to him. They're so anchored to him that if he can't get over all of that, then I just think they're just going to be a good defensive team that just can't get better than average.
Do you think they ever imagined when they gave him $230 million guaranteed that after 2 years he will have played a total of 12 games and had 14 touchdowns and 9 interceptions to show for his first 2 years of that contract?
It's too bad. It's too bad. But that's how I see it. I see it Cincinnati, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and the Brownies bringing up the tail end of the stick.
Well, Chad, I'm going to give you a little backup on the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I'm going to tell you
why.
All right. If let's say they do start Justin Fields instead, he's going to give them the guy that's going to be able to escape the pocket and do all that stuff. But they have a new offensive coordinator named Arthur Smith. Okay, the reason why that guy got fired in Atlanta, because he had all of these weapons that he couldn't figure out how to use.
That's true.
So, but he's going to go there. He has a specific set of weapons against his 2 running backs that can split the load. He's going to have a young quarterback that can move and throw. But he's got these 2 tight ends who are excellent. And he's got this excellent receiver who can beat you deep, beat you underneath, named Pickens. And if they can get that running game going, Those two tight ends are going to open up things over the middle. Pickens is going to be able to take the top off at times or hit you underneath. And they'll have some other receivers that can help season in some of that stuff. It goes back to what he was in Tennessee when he was at his best as a coordinator. So I think that's what's going to help Pittsburgh is once they get this quarterback and offensive line situation sorted out, Arthur Smith will be back in his kind of element. And I think that's what's going to probably help them out once their defense gets better as well.
And also, I think one of the most important things about Pittsburgh is they have the best leader in the NFL as a head coach. Now, how much he does with X's and O's, I don't know. But the man can lead, and he can keep people in check. I mean, he kept Antonio Brown sane for 10 years. No one can do that. But Mike Tomlin could.
Not for 10 minutes now.
Yeah.
So, anyway, what you got, Brett?
Man, for once, Chad, I absolutely agree with you on the division winner. Being a Bama boy, watching Joe Burrow come down to LSU and the kind of season he had, and then what he's been able to do in the NFL. The only problem, like I think Eric mentioned, is keeping him upright. Well, they made some off-season additions. I feel like they have finally shored up his offensive line. Look, Joe Burrow, with protection, in my eyes, he's a top 3 quarterback in the league. To me, he's the real deal. Keep in mind, they were just in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Their defense, I get that, but I'm taking Cincinnati to win that division, and they are, like Jeff had mentioned, they're going to beat each other to death, and this is a brutal division.
This is the toughest division in the game.
Yeah, Cincinnati 11-6, Baltimore 10-7. I mean, Cleveland and Pittsburgh's really going to be a toss-up. I'm more so on Eric's wagon with Fields, but Pittsburgh does have a really good defense, and Cleveland's already had the injury woes. I think they could probably push each other for last place, but I'm taking Cincinnati to absolutely win that division and possibly go back to the Super Bowl this year.
Jeff, what do you know? Is TJ Watt, is he coming in healthy this year? Is they looking at him, having him week 1 or not?
I believe that they are. They're trying to kind of nurse him through training camp. They're not, keeping him in bubble wrap. But I think as far as I know, he should be as close as you can to be 100%. I don't think he'll be totally 100% week 1, but I think he'll be able to play. They may have him on a bit of a pitch count at times. But I think they're a team, like I said, the first 4 or 5 games is still going to be an extension of preseason for Pittsburgh. So to me, when they get to midseason, if they hit a stride, expect them to make a strong push later on.
Yeah.
TJ Watt is still kind of not totally 100%. He may be 100% healed, but 100% being able to do the things he did on that injury, I don't know if he's there yet.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give it to Mama and Papa Watt. I mean, Papa Watt put some work in. Holy smokes!
So I got Baltimore at 12-5. I got Cincinnati 10-7, Cleveland 9-8, and I got Pittsburgh taking a step back to 7-10. And I'll tell you why. You want to hear their last 8 games of their schedule?
Give it to us.
They play Baltimore, then they play at Cleveland, at Cincinnati, home against Cleveland, at Philadelphia, at Baltimore, home against Kansas City, and at home against the Bengals.
Ooh.
Tell me that ain't a murder's row right there, baby.
Ooh.
Yeah, but
I don't see there's any way they survive. I don't even think they sniff 500.
As a former Justin Fields fan, if Jeff is right, and by game 4 or 5, he's their quarterback, if I transport myself back to last year, I'm thinking to myself, 2 wins maybe?
Well, 4 of those games are at Heinz Field, and that's a tough place to go, especially once it turns cold. Heinz Field's tough, man. Home field advantage still counts in this league.
And
No,
division
it doesn't.
games are always unpredictable.
Kansas City could be coasting by week 17, and they have
Yeah.
to go to Heinz Field.
Vegas
And if-
said the home game is only 1.5 points now, not 3. Just letting you know.
I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I've
Telling
never
ya.
believed that. I mean,
Vegas isn't broke.
Those guys don't know everything. They know a
Well,
lot.
I mean, they're not broke. So, I mean,
hey, you know why?
I don't
they
know.
have
The
this
MGM
huge-
Grand's getting pretty sad.
yeah. All
I
right.
believe.
We're
I
moving
believe
on to the
it's
most
time.
important division.
I think it's time to move on to the NFL Gem division of the NFC North.
That
And,
division.
up until about 2 weeks ago, I was feeling pretty confident about at least being able to. Before we get going too deep, Brian, I got a question for you. Since we are in the Vikings division now, we a couple of our panelists here, a part of our crew, they've had kind of a back and forth on Tua. This week he come out with some comments about Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator of Minnesota, about the way he was treated when Brian was head coach in Miami. Do you think, the Viking defense, of course, they rallied around their coach and stuff. Honestly, from a selfish standpoint, if it cost him another head coaching job in the NFL, that's fine, because I'd love to have him as a defensive coordinator for the rest of his career, because I think his defensive mind is dynamic.
Yeah, he's a great DC. There's no doubt in that.
But do you think it was necessary that Tua come out this week and make the comments that he made?
Well, it may not have been necessary, but I think for Tua it was to finally close that chapter. If people really wanted to know what happened, because I think that was the one problem that happened in Miami was you knew there was friction, but you didn't know if it was because of Tua or it was because of his friction with the front office is the reason why he got forced out of there. Now you know that it was both. It was not only just with the front office, but him and Tua. Okay, and unfortunately, sometimes when you have that coaching tree, you get too many rotten fruit off that tree, right? When we talk about Bill Belichick's tree, everybody goes, "Oh, he has such a big tree," but he's gotten a lot of guys hired, but very few have stuck around for this reason. Right? Some just were never very good head coaches. Some were just never very good coaches when it comes to relating to players. And when you hear how he talked to not only Tua, because he talked to other players that way too, but this is your franchise quarterback. This is the guy that's going to save your job because you drafted him. And you're telling me he shouldn't be here. Okay? Well, that's the same thing that got a Jay Gruden fired because he did that to RG3 and Dwayne Haskins. He did that, and you go through other coaches that had the same thing who you didn't want this guy, but now you're going to make his life miserable because you didn't want him. But it gets you fired in the process. You, as a coach, especially a head coach, you don't always get say over personnel, and sometimes you think you're a great evaluator, you really aren't. So they provide you with the talent. You have to coach it to the best of your ability. To me, the best coaches are the guys that take whatever hand they're dealt and find the best out of it. And for Brian Flores, he thought he was coming in there, and I've got carte blanche and do things my way, and I could talk to anybody because that's how I was. And you found out these guys won't play for you, especially your quarterback. So I think that's where it had to come out. This Tua is still trying to, he's playing time, play wise, he's superseded all of that. But mentally, to close the final book on this, I'm going to say what happened. And he put it out there in the universe. And you know what? Brian Flores needed that to happen too, because now he has to own it. And he pretty much said, I think I'm better than that, and I'm going to prove that. So he didn't deny it, but he just, he did the equitable route and moved forward, but he has to own it. If he ever wants a chance of being a head coach again, he's got to own that moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I heard today in Brian Flores' response, of course, they were batting it around on the media today. And one of the things that kind of came up, I think Stephen A. Smith was talking about it, was, there's still a lawsuit against the NFL for that from Brian Flores. Well, when you come out and you didn't deny that it happened, they were saying, listen, when it came to his lawsuit against the NFL, if he would have came out and said, listen, I categorically deny that this, Tua and I may have had our differences, but I mean, I deny any of that, that it was actually telling him to leave, whatever. But since he didn't do that, like you said, Jeff, they're like, does that soften his, lawsuit against the NFL, saying, oh, so maybe you created some of this problem. Obviously, there was a problem with Tua, so who's to say that you weren't creating some of the problem with the higher ups and stuff like that? Maybe it's not on us; it's more on you. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And what I took from it today, when I heard what Tua said, and then I listened to Flores' response, was, and being a high school coach, this too, Jeff. It's whether it's high school kids or grown-ass men. Mm-hmm. There are just some teams, individuals, whatever, that old school coaching mentality that most of us probably grew up with. I remember my high school coach telling me, boys, the day you can't take an ass chewing is the day the world comes to an end. Mm-hmm. We were terrified of that guy, but we would run through a brick wall for him. Yeah. Those days, you've got to be very careful how you pick your spots. And if you have an NFL quarterback like Tua saying, basically he had PTSD from dealing with this guy.
But keep in mind, Tua came from Alabama and Nick Saban, so it's not like he was handling kid gloves.
Correct, but the way he was talking, like Jeff mentioned, Tua needed to do it for himself. I'm like, you came from Nick Saban. I can't believe Nick Saban met you at the door and said, Tua, how you doing this morning? Everything good, bud? So I can't believe that Brian Flores was so much worse that Tua mentally, coming from where he came from in Alabama, couldn't handle a situation like that. Am I wrong, Jeff? What do you think?
Well, if it's not
Nick Saban is a little different from Belichick and Parcells because Saban can relate to kids. He couldn't relate to the adults, right? He couldn't tell those guys how to play,
right?
But when you looked at how this was more of that Belichick Parcells type anger, think about it. Tom Brady used to get kicked in the teeth by this guy in press conference. Right. This is the guy that he got him all in Super Bowl. So that was a day and age where you could do that stuff. But you're in a different time. Okay, when Parcells was in his prime and he could do all that stuff, and Ditka was in his prime and they could do all that stuff, they had way more control over the game than they do now. The players have just as much say now in organizations and stuff as the coaches do. So it really kind of goes into the point where you have to adapt. And if you think that you're just going to go out there and say so, this is your franchise quarterback, and you're saying, I didn't want you anyway, the other guy I wanted is over there. Right. Trust me, if I said that to my quarterbacks when I coached the minor league guys who are out there working hard and playing football, they'd have looked at me like, screw you then and find you another quarterback. Yeah. Okay. The only reason Tua can't do that is because he's got a contract that says I gotta play for you. Yeah. So it's a different kind of thing. Then when you're in college, you just go, you know what? I don't like this guy. I could transfer out. I don't have to deal with this. You have to when you're under contract, when you're a first round quarterback and you want to make $100 million, you got to deal with this guy calling you a-hole and everything else he's calling you. And it was the same thing with Urban Meyer when he was in Jacksonville. The stuff he was saying to players, and they were like, we can't play for this guy. And look how that situation turned out. It's a different animal in the NFL than it was 20, 30 years ago, where you can say stuff to players because they couldn't just freely leave. They couldn't stay home and ask for a trade and actually get it. Okay? There's so much more leverage for players now, especially with all the CBAs and everything else. We talk about Why are there less padded practices? Because the players flex their muscle in the CBA and said, hey guys, y'all want us to last 16, 17 games? We need less pads. And the NFL owner said, you know what, you're right. Done. So there's a lot more capitulation with both sides now than there ever was in the past with the NFL. So you can't go out there and be iron fisted anymore. You have to learn how to sometimes use the velvet hammer.
The Mike Ditka telling Refrigerator Perry that if you touch 300 pounds, I'm never playing you. Obviously, does not apply anymore.
or the Jimmy Johnson telling you you got asthma, go to the asthma field. That stuff ain't gonna work anymore.
I forgot.
Yeah, that stuff doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. All right, Ed, kick us off on the NFC North and tell us how your Vikings aren't going to be in the dump.
Oh God, I'm gonna start off right off the bat and give you my records because I don't know. I like I said, the quarterback situation I think is I call Sam frickin' Darnold. I belong to like 4 or 5 different Viking Facebook groups. And I've been kind of listening to what everybody's saying. There's actually several followers that firmly believe that Sam Darnold's going to have a fantastic year. And what I've started referring to, what I refer to as the pipe dream tour, because I'm not seeing it. I just don't think that you can take a quarterback that hasn't had the success that everybody had hoped he'd have, drafted as high as he was right out of college, that he has gone to, I think after the Jets, he went down to Carolina, didn't he? And then from Carolina, he went out to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And nothing ever changes. So I just don't see him taking the reins. J.J. McCarthy being out for the year now, does that help Sam Darnold, hurt Sam Darnold? Because he knows he's the man now. He doesn't have to look behind his back.
Well, you got Nick Mullins.
To listen to the crowd chanting for JJ halfway through a game when the Vikings haven't scored any points yet or whatever. It's squarely on his shoulders. And I just don't see it. I'm not seeing it. So I got Minnesota coming in last in the division at 7-10. I got actually I had 8-9. Excuse me. I got Vikings at 8-9. I got the Bears at 9-8. I got Green Bay at 10-7, and I got Detroit squeaking out the division again at 11-6. But what I would preface with Detroit Lions is I don't think Dan Campbell learned one thing from last year.
No.
They should have been in the Super Bowl. I was losing my mind on the couch when he just refused to kick field goals in that game. It ultimately cost him a trip to the Super Bowl. So what happens this year? I'm watching their first preseason game. He has the opportunity to kick a field goal 2 or 3 times in the game. He goes for it on 4th down every time. And then the last play of the game, the last drive of the game, they didn't have an opportunity to win because they were behind by more than 1 score. Throw a couple threes on there, maybe that final drive they need a field goal to win the game. I just don't understand how you can have a team of his caliber.
And you've got Jake Bates now from the Michigan Panthers.
Yeah. And you continue to put their team behind the 8 ball because for whatever reason, you don't believe in a 3-point field goal. To me, it's not, you're not measuring the room. You're not looking at the situation of the game. I don't understand it. So with Detroit now having a first place schedule in the division, we're going to find out if Detroit's all that this year because they're not going to sneak up like they said. You're no longer the hunter, you're the hunted. So are they going to be able to live up to that? We'll see. But I had Detroit still squeaking the division out. The Packers a close second. The Bears, I think the Bears got a hell of a future to him. I think that Caleb Williams is going to pan out and be a good quarterback. But I think as a rookie quarterback, I just think it's going to take him a year. He's going to take some lumps. He's going to have some games that, these defenses get paid too. And after there's a couple game films to watch and they start seeing some of his tendencies, they're professionals too. And I think there's going to be games that they're going to be able to slow him down. But ultimately, I think it's bigger and better days ahead for Chicago.
Well, I agree with you, Ed, in the order. However, I think, as you said, Detroit being the hunted, no longer the hunter, do we see a little of old Detroit? Of course, Campbell, he has the ability to, give games away, i.e. the Super Bowl. And, I mean, giving Green Bay any credit just makes me want to throw up in my mouth. Because I swear, Jeff, I swear to God, you have Brett Favre, then you have Aaron Rodgers. I swear to you, if Jordan Love turns out to be anywhere close to that, I may just quit watching, because no team should have a shining star, freaking horseshoe, rabbit's foot, and pot of gold at the end of the rainbow like that, when the Bears have never been able to find one, when they still talk about Sid freaking Luckman. And you got Green Bay that when I was a kid, we never lost to Green Bay, and all of a sudden, boom, Brett Favre shows up from Atlanta, and it's like, who's this kid? And boom, 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 all of a sudden we can't beat him. And then Aaron Rodgers, who like, oh, well, they've got this kid, and Brett Favre doesn't like him. They draft him. He sits on the bench for 3 years, and that pretty soon they force Brett Favre out. Rodgers shows up, and boom, 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 we can't beat him then. If this turns into Jordan Love, we can't beat him, I'm out. I'm out. Not going to be able to take it because we can't get it right. But I agree with that. I think the Bears are 1 year away. Caleb Williams is going to have to make some adjustments. The first couple games, I mean, if you look at the Bears' schedule, first, 6 or 7 games are very favorable. I mean, we don't play a division game until like week 11 or 12. So hopefully, Williams has something figured out by then. But I think we start off with the Titans. Hopefully we can get that game and all that kind of stuff. But I think they're probably 9-8 at best. Maybe sneak 10. If they sneak 10, then you may see 3 playoff teams come from this division, which I think if Caleb Williams can get it figured out quickly, and the schedule does favor him to help him get it figured out quickly. I mean, we're not playing unbelievable defense all of Houston. That'll be a tough game. But if he can get it figured out quickly going into that division side of the schedule, which I call it the last 7 games, I mean, you could see a totally different team by then. But I'm still going to pump the brakes as a Bear fan. We're still living off 1985 and 2006, losing to Peyton Manning, even after Devin Hester returned the kickoff in the Super Bowl. But so yeah, I'm going to go with the Lions because I cannot conscientiously pick the Packers at the top. I would just soon say Minnesota's better, but I'm going to go Detroit, Green Bay, Chicago, Minnesota, and wins. I mean, I think you could toss it up. I think Green Bay could easily win 11. Detroit, with the tougher schedule, could be, that 11-win mark. One of them could win 12. I don't know. But I got the Bears somewhere around 9, possibly 10, and maybe squeaking it in. Never know. But I'm not quite as high up on Minnesota. I think Minnesota wins 7 games tops.
We agree then.
So, yeah, but I'm saying tops.
Oh, I had 8 and 9.
You had 8. I'm saying 7 is tops. Like, that's high end.
Yeah.
Because I'm not as high on Sam frickin' Darnold as you are. So I'm going to say 7 wins tops for Minnesota. So I'll turn it over to Jeff and you give us your rundown on it.
I too have Detroit winning the division, but not as handily as they won it by last year. I think there's going to be a tight race between them and Green Bay, the 2 playoff teams from last year. I think Chicago will be markedly better, but I see them maxing out at 7-8 wins max. And then I have Minnesota at 6 wins max. So I think they'd probably be in that 5-win range, but 6 could be doable. The reason being, Detroit really didn't have a huge fall off this year. They were able to maintain the core of that team, add on some young pieces. Same thing with Green Bay. While they do lose one running back, they added a bunch of excellent young runners to that backfield. So they continue to get younger and talented in Green Bay. Better defensive players coming in through the draft as well. So I'm overall thinking that the Packers are going to be an improved team again this year. Now, Chicago will be improved with all the movement we saw. The young quarterback, I think all that's going to come into play. It'll take a while for them to fully get it going, but they'll be a better team by the end of the season. And then there's Minnesota. Now, we talk about the changes. Yes, we know when they lost Cousins last year, they weren't exactly the same offense. Adding in Sam Darnold, the guy who's been a turnover-prone quarterback in 3 different spots, I don't see that changing. He is who he is. He was turnover-prone in college, turnover-prone in New York, Carolina, and even in a limited time in San Francisco. This is who he is. So I don't think you can survive the turnovers and win 8, 9, 10 games with him. I think you're going to max out at 5, 6 wins because at some point he's going to have that crucial turnover that's going to cost you games, or he's going to have that point where he's getting sacked or being rattled because that's just who he has been. I've never seen Sam Darnold elevate past that, so I can't give him credit for what I have never seen. And that's the one thing about him. But I think overall, I think Minnesota has a brighter future. And unfortunately, it won't be this year with J.J. McCarthy. They're giving him the year off because most people don't miss a whole year from an MCL surgery. So I think they're more giving him the year off and saying, hey, get healthy and learn this year. And then next year you can come take this guy's job. So I think that's what it's more about. They're going to just gut it out, get some great draft picks with Sam Darnold this year, come back and reload it for next year.
Chad?
All right. I agree there. I think the MCL is usually during the season like a 2 to 4. They scope it's like 2 to 4 weeks and then they're back. So I think you've hit something there. I agree with you. I think first of all, the Packers and your Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, I take solace in this. They had 2 of the top 10, 12 quarterbacks of all time, and they get 2 championships out of it.
Oh, yeah, I love their suffering. That means in 26 of those years they suffered. I love it.
They got 2.
Yeah. 26 of those years was a disappointment. I love every minute of it, but they still got 2.
Just 2. So anyway, you know what? Having said that, I think the Packers are going to win the division.
Just a little bit.
I think the Lions. I think they have a little bit of a hangover from that loss, and I think they get second. I still think they make the playoffs. I think they'll both make the playoffs, but I just think that loss is just gonna. They're either gonna go 13, 14 wins, or they're gonna go 10, and I think that could be a psychological screwball for them that they just have a hard time getting over. And I think Chicago 7, 8 wins maybe, and bringing up third. In Minnesota, I don't see how. I mean, I think 5 wins. You better pray for 5 wins, and if it's going to be 5 wins, you should just go ahead and pray for 1.
Right.
Just pray for one
draft pick.
Just run the table, baby. Just run the table.
You know, you're exactly right. You pray for 1, or you pray for some sort of crazy trade with, like, let's say Carolina, where they received Bryce Young and you received throughout all the picks and everything, Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Darnell Wright, Torrey Taylor, Tyreek Stevenson, and a 2025 second-round pick. So either
the Vikings don't have a great trading history.
You're right. Yeah.
They are the foundation
Walker, whatever.
for the 90s Cowboys. That great move.
You guys don't know how close you are to getting muted, Brett. Brett, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brett. What do you got?
I'll go ahead and jump on the bandwagon here. Let's start from the bottom. I got Minnesota and 4 to 5 wins max. I looked at their schedule and it's not going to be pretty. But I'm a Chicago Bears fan as well, and I'm so used to saying, well, hey, we're going to have a good draft next year. Well, hey, we're going to have a good draft. Well, maybe we finally had that good draft and we're heading in the right direction. Bears 9-8. It was big that we didn't get Zudon or however you pronounce that, the pass rusher out of New England. We really could have used him and one other piece on defense. And who knows, although Caleb is a rookie, so got to maintain be a little realistic. So 9-8. I do have Green Bay 10-7, and unfortunately, and Detroit 11-6. But Chad brought up a very interesting thing. It's gonna be interesting to see how Detroit, the coaches, the players, the fans, when they get their first bit of adversity next year, after what happened in the NFC Championship game, how they're going to react to it. That could really determine what, like you said, where it could go feast or famine in Detroit. But I'm still going to say that they have had a couple really good drafts in a row, in my opinion. Other than maybe the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe some of the best drafts. I still feel like that team is the most talented team in the NFL right now, just my personal opinion. So, yeah, Detroit, Green Bay, Chicago, and Minnesota.
So I've got 2 questions and Eric, if you could take that NFC North down.
Yep, I can do that.
I got 2 questions. One's for Jeff, and one is for our new fantasy football guru of the bottom line. So we'll do Jeff's question first, and we'll end the show with our first bottom line fantasy draft question. So, Jeff, we had a viewer earlier in the show that questioned Reuben Foster. He was picked up by the Arlington Renegades this week.
Mm-hmm.
But this viewer is wondering, why is it that he can't get back to the NFL? And I know that you got thoughts on that.
Yeah, the problem is now, unlike years ago, we see guys get picked up, whether they were 31, 32, 33 years old, if they still believe they had juice left in them. It's a lot harder to do now, especially when you've been away from the league for a couple of years. Reuben Foster, we know he was in the league, a high draft pick, kind of fell out of favor because of the off-the-field issues when he was in San Francisco and a couple other stops. Been out of the league for a while. He's been in the XFL, or UFL, I should say. Still has some juice in him. Problem is now trying to get back to the NFL as officially 30 years old to be 31 in April. So he's at the point where now that they use a lot more of the analytics models, he's kind of aging out of the NFL. They're going to go with younger guys who they believe they can get for the same amount or cheaper, who they believe can give them the same kind of production. He's not the same player he was when he was first in the NFL. I believe he still could be a quality, maybe a solid starter, a very good backup. But overall, it's just the fact of the matter is he's been out of the league for a couple of years. He had the red flags with the character issues when he was there. He's been gone. He's now 30 years old, 30 and a half, pretty much. So, yeah, they're at the point now where they're starting to turn the page on guys like him. It's unfortunate because he still has gas in the tank, but they don't really go for the older players much anymore.
Okay, and then final question from one of our viewers. You know, as we talked about before, when it comes to fantasy drafts, you know, it was back in the day when Chad and I first started playing, what has it been, 30 years ago or more?
Getting close.
Oh, it's been more than 30 years.
Yeah,
But anyway, it was always jump on the running backs, jump on the running backs. If you don't have a running back, you're doomed. And now you're starting to hear more and more talk out there that you need to go heavy wide receiver in the fantasy drafts from the get-go. So Derek's question here is, he has the 3rd overall pick in the draft 10-team league. He's got Drake London and Nico Collins as his 2 keeper wide receivers. With his 3rd pick, should he grab a Justin Jefferson or should he go a different direction?
You know, I think we've hit this point a lot this year. Keeper leagues, it's hard to tell because, how many is you just keeping 2 guys per team? I take it that's what he means.
Yeah.
Because what's the talent pool like? Because if you're sitting there and you have Jamar Chase is there, I'm taking Jamar Chase. Justin Jefferson is a fantastic receiver with a lot of skills, but like we've covered in abundance tonight, he doesn't have anybody throwing the damn ball. So I think he's going to have a down year. So I think if there's something better available, got Jamar Chase or something like that, I would jump on that before I jumped on Justin Jefferson. But I mean, if the talent pool is shrunk so much that that's all you're left with, then you got to ride with him, I guess. But I'm not looking to get much out of him this year.
So who are you looking at for the Los Angeles Rams? If you had to take Cooper Kupp or you had to take Nakua, which one are you taking?
They claim the offense still goes through Cooper Kupp. And they are still going to breakfast together. So Matt and Cooper, they love to go to breakfast together. They hit Denny's every morning. They have the big platter, talk about what they're going to do that day. I would go Cooper Kupp before I went Puka Nakua. I think Puka Nakua has a much brighter, longer future, and Cooper is just, the next year or two, and then he'll be done. But then again, so will Matt. So There you go. But I would go Cooper before I went Puka, because I just think Matt is going to force feed Cooper the ball.
Hey, one more before we leave, Ed. I just got to point a comment out in the comment box because, next to Green Bay, this is pretty close to it. Got some fake news to report here. Russell Martin puts in the comment box, Dallas wins their division, NFC East. That's definitely fake news. Philadelphia is going to walk, I think, in the East. Maybe not walk, but Philadelphia is going to win.
Where's your sign? Where's your sign?
Yeah. Sorry, Russell. It's fake news, bud. Fake news. All right. So just wanted to point that out. So that's it.
So we want to thank you, Jeff, for joining us. It was a pleasure. Love to have you on again sometime. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, as you see on the screen, at Jeff Barnes 29 on, I still call it Twitter. I'm sorry, I have Twitter go. So at Jeff Barnes 29, you can also follow Team NBS Media at Team NBS Media. You'll see my work coming up very soon. I've already started Bucks Weekly, which is my recorded show on the Bucks. I will be back hosting The Last Word, our college football recap show on Saturday evenings when college football kicks off. And then on Sunday mornings for our NFL kickoff show, moving the chains. So you'll see my face quite a bit before we get to draft season.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jeff.
It's great meeting you, Jeff.
That's great.
Thanks so much.
Very good. Very good.
Great show. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Got to give a shout out. NFL football fans, NFL forever. Thank you guys for letting us post our shows in your groups. We really appreciate it.
That's on Facebook, right?
Yep, on Facebook.
Awesome.
And NFL old school. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's not going to be long now. The footballs are going to be filling the air. So looking forward to that. Again, have a great rest of your week. We will see you here again next Wednesday.